What if that tiny little Liberty 1 cent coin from 1977D, which on its face says it's worth just 1 cent, could actually be worth hundreds, thousands, even more in the right circumstances? That's not just an exciting fantasy, it's the real world of coin collecting and numismatics, where ordinary everyday money becomes extraordinary because of tiny errors, mistakes, misprints, anomalies, and rare varieties that slipped through during production at the Denver Mint almost half a century ago. When you think of a penny, you probably think of a coin you used to pay for parking or toss into a vending machine. But to coin collectors around the world, even a simple Lincoln penny can tell a history, of minting processes, of human and mechanical imperfections, and of value that far surpasses the single cent printed on its face. The 1977 Lincoln penny is one of those coins that might look like every other penny at first glance, yet beneath the surface it can hold surprises that make it worth far more than face value, sometimes dramatically more. The history of the 1977 Lincoln penny begins not just with Lincoln's portrait, but with the context of the era it was produced. By 1977, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design had been in place for nearly 2 decades. First introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, this design depicts a classic view of the memorial on the back and Lincoln's right-facing profile on the front. This design would remain the standard on U.S. 1-cent coins until 2009, when a series of commemorative designs marked the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the Lincoln cent itself. The 1977 penny was struck at the Denver branch of the United States Mint, as indicated by the small letter D, located just below the year on the obverse of the coin. That mint mark tells collectors where the coin was made, and it also plays a role in how different varieties and eras are identified and valued. In 1977, the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of these cents, over 4.1 billion, making the basic coin one of the most common in circulation today. Because so many of these coins exist, the typical 1977 Lincoln penny, especially if worn by decades of use, is worth just slightly above its face value, often only a few cents in circulated condition. For collectors, however, not all 1977 pennies are equal. While most coins that spent decades in circulation show the kind of wear and tear that causes collectors to treat them as common, with values only slightly above 1 cent, there are exceptions, a small number of coins that either survived in exceptionally good condition or carry unusual characteristics due to mistakes made during the minting process. These exceptions can command prices anywhere from tens or hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars or more, depending on rarity and condition. One of the first elements that can push the value of a 1977 penny above face value is its condition. Most coins that circulated for years carry nicks, scratches, and surface wear that degrade detail. These circulated coins are typically worth only a few cents to collectors, maybe around 25 cents to a few dollars if they're particularly nice, clean examples. In contrast, coins that were uncirculated, meaning they showed no wear from circulation and retained their original mint luster, can be worth significantly more. According to current market data, uncirculated 1977 pennies can trade for many dollars, sometimes exceeding $20 or more for pieces in very high mint state grades, and even reaching values hundreds or thousands of dollars when the coin has retained its original deep red color and the surfaces show virtually no flaws. One record sale involved a 1977 penny graded MS68 red that sold for over $7,000 at a major auction, making it one of the most valuable examples of this date ever recorded. But condition isn't the only thing collectors pay attention to. Some coins are fascinating precisely because something went wrong during the minting process, and those are the kinds of mistakes that can create very rare and desirable varieties. Many of these errors arise from how coins were physically manufactured, from preparing the metal blanks, to how the dies were made and used, to how each coin was struck. These mint errors tell a history of the massive industrial process behind coin production and the occasional slips in quality control that allow anomalies to enter circulation. One of the more common and interesting categories of error is the off-center strike. This happens when the metal blank, called a planchet, isn't perfectly centered under the coin press when the dies strike it. If the planchet is slightly misaligned, part of the design may be missing from one side of the coin. In such cases, collectors call it an off-center error, and the value can depend on just how much of the design is missing. For pennies where 10 to 15% of the design is missing, values are modest, but for dramatic off-center strikes where 30 to 50% or more of the surface is blank and yet the date and mint mark remain visible, these coins can be quite valuable, sometimes exceeding $100 or more in the right condition. Another compelling variety is the double-punched or repunched mint mark, often abbreviated as RPM. In the 1970s, mint marks were still added to dies manually by workers at the mint. If the punch didn't align perfectly on the first try, a worker might try again, leaving overlapping or offset impressions of the mint mark in the die. Coins struck from a die with such a variation can show traces of the original mint mark impression beneath the final one on the coin's surface. These RPM coins are collectible. While most are not extremely rare, they can still fetch premiums over standard coins, often selling in the range of a few dollars up to around $15 or so depending on the clarity of the variety and the condition of the coin. In addition to mint mark issues, Lincoln cents can show other kinds of die errors that create collectible varieties. One frequently noted example is the BI error, a type of die crack where a raised metal line appears between the letters B and E in the word liberty, giving the illusion of an extra letter between them. This raised line is actually caused by a crack in the die used to strike the coin. BI errors are relatively common in Lincoln cents across many dates, including 1977, and are collectible by die error enthusiasts. Depending on grade and eye appeal, these coins can sell for modest premiums, often in the range of a few dollars up to around $10 or more for attractive examples. Another die phenomenon that can make a coin interesting is the cud. A cud occurs when part of a die breaks off entirely, leaving a blank area on the die that then transfers to the coins it strikes. On the coin, a cud appears as a raised, unintentional lump or blob of metal along the edge, distorting the design. These cud variety coins are rarer than simple die cracks and can command higher prices, often reaching up to $150 or more in good condition, especially if the cud is dramatic and well-defined. Errors related to wrong planchets where a coin is struck on the wrong type of metal blank are another category of interest, and though they are much rarer, they can be highly valuable. In some documented cases for the 1977 series, a penny die might have struck a planchet meant for another denomination like a dime or quarter. This kind of error results in a coin whose diameter, weight, and metal composition differ significantly from normal pennies. For example, a 1977 penny struck on a clad dime planchet has been reported to sell for several $100s due to its rarity and visual uniqueness. Collectors also pay attention to double-struck errors. These occur when a coin fails to fully eject from the mint press after the first strike and instead receives a second strike, sometimes perfectly aligned, sometimes misaligned, and sometimes at an angle. Double-struck coins show overlapping designs or a faint secondary impression, and dramatic examples with clear double images can be quite valuable, often selling for $75 to $300 or more, depending on how distinct the double strike appears and whether key features like the date remain readable. All of these varieties and errors contribute to the collectible appeal of certain 1977 D pennies. The presence of an error doesn't automatically make every coin incredibly valuable. Errors can vary widely in degree and visibility, but the more dramatic and visually interesting an error is, and the fewer examples are known to exist, the more likely it is to attract collector interest and command a premium above the ordinary price for an uncirculated example. It's also worth noting that market records and auction results show how dramatically values can vary by condition and variety. While the vast majority of ordinary circulated 1977 D pennies are worth only a few cents to collectors, the highest graded uncirculated examples, particularly those retaining their original red copper color, can be worth thousands of dollars at auction because coins of that preservation level are extremely rare given the large mintage and decades of circulation. One record sale involved an MS-68 red 1977 D penny selling for over $7,000. The reality of the coin market is that a coin's face value represents only its legal tender amount, 1 cent, that you could spend in commerce. Its real value, especially for collectors, is determined by a combination of rarity, condition, historical interest, error type, eye appeal, and collector demand. Many collectors specialize in specific series, and Lincoln cents, especially those with identifiable errors or unusual varieties, hold a special place because they are ubiquitous in circulation yet occasionally yield surprises that transform them into prized collection pieces. So if you or anyone else stumbles across a 1977 D Lincoln penny in change or in an old collection, it's worth a closer look. Ordinary ones are probably just worth face value or slightly above as a copper example. But if you notice unusual features, dramatic doubling of letters, misalignment of design, extra lumps on the surface, missing design elements, or irregular metal, you might be looking at something far more interesting. Checking values through books, collector guides, or professional grading services can help establish whether you have a coin that's merely a piece of everyday history or something that's worth holding onto as a collectible treasure. In the end, the history of the 1977 D Lincoln penny reminds us that even the most common coins can hold unexpected value when viewed through the right lens. A simple 1-cent piece, minted in staggering numbers for everyday transactions, can become a doorway into the intricate world of numismatics, where tiny mistakes and preserved details tell stories of minting processes, historical contexts, and the timeless appeal of rarity. Picture unremarkable copper passing through hands for decades, suddenly revealing an unusual doubling of Lincoln's features or a strange off-center strike that tells a history about how coins were made rather than just used. This is exactly the fascinating world surrounding the Liberty 1-cent 1984 Lincoln penny, a coin that at first appears ordinary but whose history, minting quirks, and era possibilities can make it dramatically more valuable than the single cent stamped on its surface. The 1984 Lincoln penny is part of a long-running series of United States 1-cent coins featuring President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. By 1984, the Lincoln Memorial design had been in use for more than 2 decades, having first been introduced in 1959 to honor Lincoln's 150th birthday and the 50th anniversary of the Lincoln cent itself. In that era, ordinary pennies circulated everywhere, in cash registers, shaken from pockets, dropped into vending machines, and saved in jars. The vast mintage of pennies in that year, over 13.5 billion struck across the U.S. Mint's facilities, means that 1984 pennies are extremely common coins in everyday circulation. Most of those coins bear no mint mark at all, meaning they were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, while others bear a D for the Denver Mint or an S for the San Francisco Mint on proof coins, and most of them are worth only their face value or perhaps a modest fraction more if they are in pristine condition collected soon after minting. In everyday commerce, a typical 1984 Lincoln penny in circulated condition trades for practically 1 cent its nominal face value, and even some uncirculated examples might only fetch $1 or so because the sheer number produced means that examples in ordinary condition are abundant. But that simple baseline reflects only coins that show no unusual features. The real market for this coin becomes compelling when we consider what happens under the surface of mass minting: rare errors, misprints, and varieties that slipped past quality control and survived into circulation. These anomalies are why certain 1984 pennies have soared well beyond face value, and in rare cases even soared into realms that seem almost unbelievable, values once recorded at major auctions that approach 4-figure and 5-figure prices for the most dramatic examples. To truly understand why some 1984 pennies can fetch such high values today, it helps to look at both the history of their production and the mechanics of coin minting, which inform us about how these anomalies arise and why collectors prize them. The United States Mint in 1984 was producing pennies with a modern metal composition that had been introduced in 1982, a copper-plated zinc planchet where the coin's core was mostly zinc with a thin copper layer bonded over it. This change from the previous copper alloy was partly a response to rising metal costs, and it resulted in the familiar red-brown color most people associate with modern pennies. Typically, the minting process works by preparing blank discs of the proper metal composition called planchets, and then stamping them between 2 engraved dies under immense pressure. The result is a coin with the detailed design of Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the depiction of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. This process is highly automated and carefully controlled, yet even small malfunctions at the die-making stage or slight misalignments during striking can create errors that are extremely rare in the context of billions of coins produced. The most celebrated and valuable type of error associated with 1984 Lincoln pennies is the double die obverse error, often referred to by collectors as the double ear variety because Lincoln's ear appears to show a mirror image, a doubling of part of its shape. This is caused not by the stamping of an individual coin more than once but by a mistake in the die creation process when a working die receives more than one hubbing impression that is misaligned. The result is a die that imparts a doubled image in every coin it strikes until it is identified and retired. For the 1984 Lincoln cent, two main doubled die obverse varieties are recognized, FS101 and FS102, with FS101 being the more dramatic and highly sought after by collectors. FS101 shows pronounced doubling most visible on Lincoln's ear lobe and sometimes on other features such as the date digits, while FS102 displays more subtle doubling that may be apparent in Lincoln's beard and bow tie area but usually requires magnification to appreciate fully. Because the doubled die obverse is a minting error that occurred early in the production of a set of dies, it is both rare and immediately recognizable even to the untrained eye, if the doubling is dramatic. Coins with this variety do not circulate in everyday commerce once they are discovered, so the supply among collectors remains small relative to the billions of ordinary coins. That scarcity combined with the dramatic visual effect and collector demand drives values dramatically above face value. According to updated market reporting, the doubled die obverse penny from 1984 can sell for hundreds of dollars in circulated or lower mint state grades and for thousands of dollars in higher mint state condition. Some exceptional certified examples graded MS68RD have sold at auction for thousands, and a particularly dramatic specimen with sharp doubling and superb surfaces fetched nearly $16,000 in 2025, demonstrating how far value can escalate when rarity and condition meet collector demand. This dramatic double die variety is not the only error, however. Another common category of mint errors that collectors search for is the off-center strike. This type of error happens when a planchet shifts slightly in the press before being struck, so the die design is not centered on the coin blank. The result is that part of the design appears cut off or missing altogether around the edges. Off-center strikes can range from only slightly misaligned just a few percent off the center to dramatically off-center, where significant portions of Lincoln's face or the memorial design are absent. In general, the more off-center the strike is while retaining a visible and readable date and mint mark, the more valuable the coin becomes because such errors are unusual and visually appealing to error coin collectors. Minor off-center pieces may fetch a modest premium above regular coins, but dramatic examples can trade for hundreds or more depending on condition and degree of misalignment. Another error type is the clipped planchet. In this scenario, the blank prepared for striking was cut imperfectly, leaving a crescent shapeless portion missing along the coin's edge before it was ever struck by the dies. If a coin shows such a clip, that is clearly part of the planchet manufacturing process rather than post-mint damage, which collectors call post-mint damage, and does not add value, then that coin is considered collectible and can command a premium. The value of a clipped planchet error depends on how large and how regular the clipped area appears, with larger and more dramatic clips generally attracting more collector interest. Errors like die breaks or cuts can also add to a coin's numismatic appeal. These occur when a portion of the die breaks off during use, leaving a blank space or irregular raised blob of metal on the struck coins. On 1984 pennies, this might appear as a raised, irregular area near the rim, or replacing part of the normal design. While smaller die chips may not significantly increase value, more substantial cuts that create clear irregularities on the coin's surface can make the coin more collectible. Another intriguing error variety involves unplated planchet errors, where a 1984 Lincoln cent was struck on a planchet that somehow did not receive its intended copper plating. Since 1984 pennies are copper-plated zinc, a planchet missing its plating will appear silvery or gray rather than the copper color expected. These unplated cents are relatively rare and can be appealing to error collectors because they are visually distinct from standard examples and represent a clear manufacturing anomaly. There are also double struck off-center errors, lamination errors, and uniface strike errors where only one side of the planchet was struck, or metal layers separate due to flaws in the planchet alloy. All of these various error types influence a coin's collectible value, and each error has its own typical price range based on how severe and visually appealing the anomaly appears and how rare surviving examples are. In addition to error coins and anomalies, condition and grading play a crucial role in a coin's value. Numismatists grade coins on a scale from poor to mint state, with mint state grades abbreviated MS, indicating coins that show no signs of wear from circulation and maintain their original luster and surface quality. Coins graded MS60 to MS70 reflect increasing levels of preservation, detail, and eye appeal, with higher numbers representing fewer marks, sharper details, and better overall surfaces. Ordinary circulated 1984 pennies may only fetch a few cents or a couple of dollars in very high condition. But the rare error coins and uncirculated pieces in excellent grades, especially those with original red color remaining, can be worth hundreds to thousands of dollars if certified by reputable grading services. Auction records show significant sales for high-grade specimens, with MS68 examples of rare double-die varieties bringing exceptionally high prices due to their scarcity and collector demand. Whether exploring the price realized for an error penny at auction or learning how collectors identify errors, the key takeaway remains the same: the face value printed on a coin is only the beginning of its story. For billions of ordinary 1984 pennies, those stories are simple 1 cent exchanged millions of times in everyday commerce and carried in pockets across the nation. But for the rare few that exhibit unmistakable mint errors, unusual varieties, or appear in superb uncirculated condition, the history becomes far richer and potentially much more lucrative to collectors and investors. Coins like the double-die obverse examples from 1984 remind us that even standard, everyday currency, something most people overlook, can turn into a valuable artifact of mint history and a cherished item for collectors. Many of these rare error coins were distributed unknowingly into circulation and remain mixed in with ordinary change today, waiting for a sharp eye or a collector's intuition to uncover their hidden value. So the next time you examine an old Lincoln penny from 1984, take a close look at the details: Lincoln's ear, the numerals of the date, the mint mark, the alignment of the design, because something extraordinary might be hiding on a coin that seems completely ordinary at first glance. What if that ordinary coin, a Liberty 1 cent 1986 Lincoln penny, could be worth far more than 1 cent simply because of the way it was struck nearly 4 decades ago? What if that little piece of metal in your hand could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars because of mistakes made during the minting process, rare varieties, or tiny quirks that escaped quality control and ended up in circulation? This is not just an intriguing guessing game, this is the real history of the 1986 Lincoln penny, a history of mass production, minting errors, collector fascination, and shifting market values that can turn everyday pocket change into prized numismatic treasure. The Liberty 1 cent coin you see from 1986 is part of a long tradition of Lincoln Memorial pennies that began in 1959 and continued until 2008. The obverse of these coins features a right-facing portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, and the reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial, a design that commemorated the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and quickly became one of the most enduring images on American coinage. In 1986, the United States Mint produced enormous numbers of these pennies. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 4.49 billion, and the Denver Mint, which is the focus of this historical journey, struck more than 4.44 billion 1986 pennies that bore the little d below the year, indicating Denver production. These coins were then released into circulation and used for everyday purchases, change, and commerce across the entire country. Because so many were made and so many remain in the hands of collectors and the public today, the majority of ordinary 1986 pennies circulating now are worth just 1 cent, or only a few cents above that if they are in particularly nice condition. Thus, in their everyday state, these coins are essentially what they were always intended to be: small denominations of currency facilitating ordinary transactions. For most of these pennies that have spent decades in circulation, their worth remains incredibly close to face value. In worn, circulated condition, a typical 1986 penny might sell to a collector for only a few cents or up to about 10 cents at most, depending on eye appeal and surface condition. Uncirculated 1986 pennies that have never been spent and retain sharp details and original luster can be worth more, sometimes several dollars, and in very high mint state grades perhaps around $20 to $40, because collectors value coins that look nearly as perfect as the moment they left the mint. But those are still modest premiums compared to what rare error varieties and dramatic mint mistakes can fetch when they are authenticated and placed in the marketplace. The real value history for the 1986 Lincoln penny begins when we look beyond the vast bulk of ordinary strikes and into the minting process itself. Coins are not magically created fully formed, they are produced by machines that strike blank metal discs called planchets with engraved dies under immense pressure. Before the coins are struck, the dies themselves are created by a process that involves making impressions from hubs, and every step in this process from die preparation to planchet manufacture to the final striking can produce anomalies. These anomalies, when they result in a coin that differs from the standard design, are known as errors or varieties, and some of them are highly sought after by collectors because they are rare, visually interesting, and provide a direct connection to how coins were physically made decades ago. One of the most famous and most valuable categories of errors on 1986 Lincoln pennies, including the Denver strikes, is the double die obverse error. Unlike machine doubling, which is a shallow, flat doubling caused during striking and usually has no value, a true double die error originates in the die making stage. When a die receives more than one hub impression slightly misaligned from the first, the resulting die carries duplicated design elements. Every coin struck from that flawed die will show that raised doubling in parts of the design, and in the case of the 1986 Lincoln cent, the doubling often appears on inscriptions such as Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date, 1986, and can also affect Lincoln's features or other design elements. This error type is cataloged and recognized among coin specialists, and collectors know exactly what to look for under magnification. True 1986D double die obverse pennies are scarce because only a limited number of dies were affected, and once such a die was retired, no more of that variety could be produced. Collector demand for these coins, particularly in visually strong examples, has driven values well above what any ordinary 1986 penny could achieve. According to current numismatic guides, circulated 1986D double die obverse pennies can sell in the range of $15 to $40 or more depending on condition, while uncirculated examples graded in mint state can often bring prices from several $100s up to nearly $1,000 or more. Certified pieces in high grades like MS65, where the surfaces are crisp and the doubling is clearly visible, have been documented selling for substantial premiums. For example, auction records show that certified examples of certain 1986 double die cents have brought prices in the high hundreds, and in some instances approaching well over 5 figures for the most striking examples with exceptional eye appeal and strong doubling. The double die error is not the only mint mistake that can boost the value of a 1986D penny. Another category that draws collector attention is the off-center strike error. This type of error occurs when the planchet is not properly positioned under the dies at the moment of striking, so part of the Lincoln design, whether on the obverse or reverse, is missing or shifted toward one side of the coin. Off-center errors vary in severity. A slight off-center strike where only a few percentage points of the design are off may be only lightly collectible, but as the percentage increases, meaning more of the design is missing and the striking is visibly misaligned, the coin becomes far more interesting and valuable to collectors. Dramatic off-center errors, especially those where significant portions of the date or mint mark are still visible, can sell for anywhere from tens of dollars to well into the hundreds depending on how off-center and how appealing the error appears to a specialist or enthusiast. There are other notable error types to be aware of in the context of 1986 pennies. Lamination errors occur when the copper plating separates from the zinc core, often appearing as peeling layers on the surface of the coin. These can vary from minor and barely noticeable to dramatic flakes missing large sections of copper, exposing the gray zinc beneath. Depending on the extent of the missing plating and overall eye appeal, these coins can be worth a modest premium to error collectors, often several tens of dollars or more for dramatic examples. Broad strike errors are another category where the penny is struck without the restraining collar, allowing the metal to flow outward and produce a coin with a larger diameter and spread out design. Broad strikes with off-center characteristics, or those that exhibit dramatic displacement, can attract collector interest and bring premiums over the typical uncirculated example. A rarer and more dramatic class of errors involves wrong planchet strikes. While extremely uncommon, there have been documented cases where a Lincoln cent die accidentally struck a planchet intended for another denomination, such as a dime. These coins are often referred to as wrong planchet errors and are among the most celebrated error types because they produce coins that are visually striking and wholly different in metal, weight, and appearance compared to ordinary pennies. These wrong planchet error coins can realize significant values because they are so rare and unusual, in some cases fetching prices in the mid-hundreds to over $1,000 or more depending on condition and visibility of the mismatch. Varieties involving mint mark anomalies also occur in the 1986 Lincoln Cent series, particularly because, even by the mid-1980s, mint marks were not always applied perfectly during the die preparation stage. Repunched mint marks RPMs appear when the mint mark letter was struck more than one slightly off position on the die itself. Coins struck from such a die will show multiple images of the D mint mark, a subtle but distinct sign to collectors. RPM varieties on 1980-60 pennies often sell for modest premiums, with values depending on how noticeable and dramatic the repunching appears on the resulting coins. While not as dramatic as a double die or major off-center strike, these varieties are still collectible and can add a few dollars or more to the value of a coin that would otherwise be worth only face value. Another type of die-related variety that collectors look for on 1986 pennies is the BI error, where a crack develops in the die and manifests on the struck coin as a raised vertical line resembling an extra letter between the letters B and E in the word Liberty. While relatively common across Lincoln cents, BI errors on 1986 denominations still hold interest for error collectors and can add value, though typically more modest compared to dramatic doubled dies and major off-center errors. Even with all these error possibilities, the vast majority of 1980-60 Lincoln pennies remain ordinary strikes that are worth little more than face value when found in general circulation. It is the combination of rarity and condition that drives collector values upward. In the case of ordinary circulated 1980-60 coins showing typical wear, prices are normally trivial, a few cents above face for worn examples, and perhaps a buck or two for cooler uncirculated coins with decent surfaces. When collectors pursue complete date and mint mark sets or seek higher grade pieces for quality reasons, uncirculated coins graded MS65 and above can attract premiums because not many pennies survive decades without any circulation marks or handling abrasions. The market values for these coins reflect a mix of scarcity, collector demand, rarity of the error type, and condition. A 1980-60 penny with no unusual features remains common and is still essentially currency. But a true double die obverse 1980-60 penny in mint state is not common at all, and the difference in value between an ordinary penny and this error coin can be enormous, ranging from a few dollars to hundreds or even thousands of dollars when verified and graded professionally. Similarly, dramatic off-center errors, wrong planchet strikes, and other rare varieties can command high prices because collectors know that these anomalies represent physical evidence of imperfection in the minting process, evidence that is not easily replicated and often documented as scarce in official numismatic references. Coins in pristine condition, free of post-mint damage, scratches, and corrosion are particularly prized. The grading scale used by professional services measures many aspects of a coin's condition, from surface preservation to strike quality and overall eye appeal. Certified coins with high grades often sell for significantly more than similar ungraded coins because buyers trust the objective assessment and know they are acquiring pieces that genuinely deserve their level in the numismatic hierarchy. For serious collectors and investors, having a rare 1980-60 error coin in a certified slab with a high grade can make a huge difference in price realized at auction or in private sales. So while the face value on every Liberty 1 cent 1980-60 Lincoln penny remains just 1 cent, the real value of certain coins can be vastly different depending on whether the coin is an ordinary circulation example or a rare survivor with an unusual history written right into its metal. Whether it's a subtle minting variety, a dramatic error, or an exceptional example preserved in near-perfect condition, these pennies remind us that even everyday change carries within it a potential history and value far beyond its stamped denomination.